In this video, I'm going to show you how to refurbish a game cart reader in a Nintendo Switch, and we're going to take off that old game cart reader off this little green motherboard. We're going to replace it. So let's go to the microscope and chase that refurb. All right, the first things first. If someone wrote bad on the game cart reader, then you know it's bad. Okay, I'm just kidding. So if you look inside the game cart reader, you can see a couple of pins that have bent and kind of broke. So yeah, this cart definitely needs to be replaced. So first things first, we're going to need to put some flux on all of these anchor pins. I can call them anchor pins because they're technically tiny pins, even though they're anchor posts, whatever you want to call them. Now, I just ran out of flux. I'm using some other flux that I had laying around. And if you're not sure what flux does, flux helps that solder to flow, which I have explained this many, many times. We've got the fume extractor nice and close to the area we're working on because we want to save our lungs from dying. I want to go ahead and take the soldering iron, and we're going to flow some solder to these joints here, just like that. What I want to do is want to flow some of that leaded solder into that hole, so it mixes with the lead-free, which ultimately lowers the melting temperature, and then we can just clear out the joint much easier and quicker. Now, there are two ways that we can extract the solder from these holes here to demount our game cart reader. So the first way that we can do this is we can use some solder braid, because I know that not everyone has a desoldering gun here. So the first thing we're going to try to use is a desolder braid, and then we'll go in with the other holes and use our desoldering gun. All right, so first things first, we take our solder braid and our iron, and we're going to go ahead and just put it in this general vicinity. I typically like to use the desoldering gun for this job because it doesn't seem to always get the holes just right. Yeah, you see, it didn't really suck out the holes that well. It doesn't always turn out just right for you, unfortunately. I was going to try to do it with both sides, but as you can see, it's only really just sucking out solder on the top side of it. So this is the reason why I invested a few bucks and bought myself a desoldering gun, because it literally just makes all of the difference. Grab our desoldering gun, and we're going to go ahead and put it on the joint here, and it should melt. We got the joint melted, and we're going to suck it out. Look at that. See? No more solder. Do the same for this one. Now, it's not going to be perfect, but it's going to be much, much better than using the solder wick. We can do this next one here. Beautiful. Last but not least, this guy. There we go. Now on the other side here, we do have a bunch of pins. Now I'm going to show you exactly how we can get these desoldered, and we can take our game cart reader and lift it right off this little board. First, you got to add that flux. You already know. Now you can do the same job with the chisel tip I was just using, but I prefer to use this one because we can heat more joints at the same time. Now we're going to go ahead and just start flowing all of our joints with leaded solder. What may help is getting one of these Sesamo opening tools or something similar and getting underneath that connector like that. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and heat up this area right here while gently lifting with our tool. As you can see, we're already partially lifted here, which is great. And as we're heating these up, we can go ahead and just keep sliding our tool under it more and more. And there we go. All right, now our game cart reader has been lifted away from the board. Now, do you remember this one little pin here, or this little, thing that goes through the board, little anchor? These both are still kind of stuck in with a little bit of solder. So the way you can remove these pretty quick is you can just fill it up with solder, and we might be able to fill this one up with solder as well. So we can put our little tool here, and remember, it's very, very gentle. This board is very, very thin, and it can break very, very quick and easily. So heat this up and separate the board. So there we go. Board is now separated on one side. We should be able to just heat this up, and it should just drop right out. And there it is. All right, now here comes my absolute favorite part. We're going to go ahead and clean up all this old excess solder by using some flux. And now we can successfully use our solder braid. We're going to go ahead and just clean these pads up with the solder braid. We can use some isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip to go ahead and clean up these pads right here. Also, while we're ahead, we can go ahead and just clear out these holes with the desoldering gun. Just like that. And this one over here. Perfect. All right, we got our brand new cart reader on the board. Now let's go ahead and solder it in. So I like to lay the card reader flat because it's just going to make all the difference when we're actually soldering it in. All right, so for this part, we don't necessarily need flux for this. because the solder already has flux in. But of course, you know, if our joints didn't look good, then we would add flux, you know? All right, flow some solder. There we go. And last one here, right in there. Beautiful. While we're ahead, we can go ahead and just clean up the flux that has been left over on all sides here and here. Now we're ready for our pins. Let's go ahead and add that flux. We're going to add a decent amount of solder to our iron here. We're going to have to solder quite a bit. We're going to do a method called drag soldering, where you just put solder on your iron and you basically just drag it on over to all the other pins, just like that. We can go ahead and do that again. It's probably one of the most satisfying ways to solder. Man, like, look at those joints shine, man. That's exactly what you want. You want to use good flux and you want to use good solder. Now we can go ahead and just clean up the pins with isopropyl alcohol, and we are done. So here we go. We got a refurbished game cart reader for the Nintendo Switch. Every Nintendo Switch does use a different cart reader. It either has 2 different versions. So sometimes this is the best way if you're a repair shop and you want to change just your cart reader and not the whole board, then you can do that. If you enjoyed this type of content, consider subscribing. Why wouldn't people subscribe? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, people should always subscribe to channels that they like, that they got value from. You know what I mean? Yeah.
I mean, like, just subscribe.
Just subscribe. Like, that's it.
It's free and it helps him out.
Yeah, it's free.